Today, we review how the week has been like. In studio, I'm joined by Dr. Barak Muluka, Strategic Communication Advisor, seated right in the middle, and Wanjiru Gikonyo, Transformative Governance Expert. And now, we focus on matters education. There is actually a looming crisis. Teachers' unions maintain that come Monday, schools will not reopen for the third term. And just to begin with you, Gikonyo, you are a parent. When we talk of priorities as a country, are we having them right or wrong?
Well, of course, in the larger scope of it, the budget heads are, we've had a focus on large infrastructure development. A lot of that is riddled with corruption so that it really gobbles up the budget. So that's a problem. The other problem, of course, is efficiency of expenditure, because what the ministry keeps saying is that they are spending a sizable amount of the budget. I think it might be up to 26%. I can't remember the last figure of the budget in the education sector. And there's a sense of inefficiency and all of that. But you have to remember that education is the foundation of any successful nation. You also have to remember that we are a country with a large young population that needs to be trained and well equipped. So education is that sector that cannot afford to be played around with. And when you look at the TSC's recent report, I think from the last financial year, they say they have a problem because teachers are demoralized. Teachers are, there's a lot of absenteeism, there's a lot of mental health issues. So there's also the social aspect of having a sector that's perennially on strike. Add to that, the implementation of the CBC is a big, there's a cost attached to that. So we've had, so what do? We have a mess and we have a problem. And the government is trying very hard to, make promises. And the teachers are saying, no, we don't want promises, we want money on the table. So one, it's about priorities. Two, it's about public good and looking at what is in the public interest. There's also a very good proposal, because with every crisis, there's an opportunity. And the opportunity coming out of this is that there are so many financing mechanisms that are going into the education sector, but they are all siloed.
So we need to collapse them and have one
collapse them, pay our teachers well, ensure this money is accountable. In the implementation, you see now we are midpoint of an implementation of a system which the government imprudently rushed. Because how do you rush the implementation of something as fundamental as an education curriculum? So there is a need to really be very alive to how do we are in crisis management with lack of fiscal space, with the needs, because you can't tell teachers defy your needs. Needs must be met now. So we need some very clear discussions. But I think money has to be put on the table. It needs to be drawn. Like we said, 1/3 is going to corruption. What William Ruto missed in taking office was that the only option he had to resolve the problems this country is facing is one, accountability. It is to seal those loopholes in practice. That meant appointing people of integrity as opposed to people of questionable integrity, who then get into office and they dilute matters. And then on debt, the approach being taken is not working. The amount of money being drawn in for debt payments, I think, is reaching up to 70% of the revenue collected locally. We cannot afford it. And there's a discussion and a proposal that needs to be followed up around debt. Of course, we need to audit, but debt cancellation. going back and saying, look, we cannot pay these debts. Kenya is not the only country.
That will be considered as defaulting.
It will.
And there are to the market.
There already our commercial debt status is at junk level. This means any borrowing we are making on the international market is extremely expensive, which is why we'll be able to keep borrowing, because they are assured whatever the case, whichever services grind down, we will pay, but at a cost that is very, very, that is really not prudent. So what do you do when you cannot pay and you must eat? If you're a household and you're in a financial crisis, your children must be fed. So at the point you go to the bank and say, I can't pay. What do you do? And then you deal with that ramification. And this can be done at a global level because regionally, we are not the only country in this crunch. But it has to be underpinned by accountability, because we are in this problem because people have benefited themselves through theft of the monies that we have procured.
Dr. Barak, come Monday, schools might not reopen. All these, of course, are money issues. And Wanjiru argues that it's time we shift on where to prioritize, especially whether it's debt or our own children, of course, here to mean teachers. How is that opinion? At the same time, the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary, that is John Mbadi, says there is no money to even hire 46,000 JSS teachers or additional 20,000 JSS teachers. On education, is Ruto dealing with it properly? And also, this is a litmus test for Migos Ogamba, education, CS, Mutua, labor, CS, and even John Mbadi himself as the Treasury Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you. I listened to John Mbadi last evening. He was asked questions about the education docket, and he would say, go and ask the CS for education, which I thought was very irresponsible. He says, my role is to make the money available. If it's not there, I say it's not there. That is the height of irresponsibility. But we put it to the fact that he's new in that space. He's probably not had the opportunity to reflect on the implications of the things that he says. But once you
so far, is this the John Mbadi you've known for years? He already has changed.
I could hear him saying things that made him sound very strange. But then, of course, I'm familiar with George Orwell, and particularly the conclusive remarks in Animal Farm, where they say the creatures standing outside the farmhouse looked through the window and their eyes moved from man to pig and from pig to man and back to pig again, and already it was becoming impossible to tell the difference. So that bit does not surprise me. The political class at the very top, we have established without a doubt, behaves like canines, especially in the season of ovulation. They mingle and congress as freely as they want. And in this LGBTQ age, they are all there across the gender divide, doing whatever it is that they do. I think that message gets home. But let's just get back to education. Joel, you say that a crisis is looming. A crisis is not looming. We are in the middle of a crisis. It is not coming. It is already here. Once again, a badly written headline. I think you should engage me to be your revised editor, to be telling you not to write these kinds of headlines. Fat pay slips for teachers. What do we mean by fat? Some of these are very loaded idioms. We are telling the public that the teachers have now got legis. It's very fat. And when you get to the story at page 4, you will see Missouri and or you telling us it's a promise. We are not very sure. We have got to wait. Some time back, there was a problem with the doctors, and we saw Deputy President Gachagua telling the country that they had already sent money to the counties when nothing had been sent. So I cannot take that seriously.
So if John Mbadi says there's no money,
if he says
can you reallocate the money that
no
will
money,
pay debt to, first of all, settle our own issues?
Before we even get to debt repayment, there are these premature campaign tours that His Excellency the President is making across the country, going all over the country, cutting across the Republic, launching things that were launched some years back.
I thought that was considered as a development tour.
Some of them, the work of the president is not to gravitate across the country, making speeches and issuing what essentially boil down to vacuous promises that he knows very well, or should know, or ought to know, that he does not have the funds to fulfill. Although, of course, I can see that he has scaled down the level of the things he's launching. They are including things like a tap here, a tap there. So maybe those ones he can fulfill. But that notwithstanding, the overall movement with that entire entourage is costing this country a lot of money.
So that is where the money is.
Particularly when we are seeing here, MPs uncover fake imprest scheme. When the president goes out there, you will discover that in the ministries, people who are seated right in whichever ministry it is they work in have also taken imprest, and that they have also traveled. When they have not traveled, they have not gone anywhere. That's where we ought to start. A little more deeply, we have challenges with the curriculum itself. Curriculum in the sense,
the CBC.
Yes, indeed. That number one, they've been writing the curriculum as the learners move to the next stage. I have never seen anything like that anywhere in the world. I've had the privilege of working as a publishing editor, developing learning and teaching materials, and I'm aware that first of all, if you have developed the curriculum, you then start developing the syllabuses, and those syllabuses are mapping to the curriculum, which is mapping to the national needs. And you are looking at them in a very futuristic context. They have got to be tested. Then books and other learning materials and aids have got to be developed. Here we are doing these things one step at a time. We are not even quite clear where the standard 4 material is going to gel with the class 6, and after that, or what we are calling year 6 or year 7 or year 8. Then move away from that. We are seeing a situation where we are not clear whether we want to take year 7 and 8 to the secondary schools, or whether it's going to remain in the primary school space. It ought to be very obvious and very commonsensical that education is about growth, it's about development, it's about change. And that if you are going to be keeping these learners in the same environment until the kingdom come, they are not learning anything.
So you fault the whole system?
The entire thing caboodle, yeah? Because education is also about picking up other things from that environment.
Well, I'm getting back to you just to elaborate further. Wanjiru, you had suggested about collapsing all these, NGCDF, blah, blah, blah. So members of the National Government Constituency Development Fund, led by the committee chair, that is Musa Sirma, yesterday urged Kenyans that they should jealously guard the kitty.
Yes.
So is it about MPs issuing bursaries or really about the systems working for us?
Joel, you know, we are also in court on the CDF and the NGCDF. And
this time around, it's CDF and NGCDF.
On both of them, yes. And we have a Supreme Court ruling, actually, on the CDF, which negates any space for the NGCDF to continue. So the only and this is why you saw during the NADCO, in the NADCO report, a question was raised on CDF and the possibility of enshrining it into the Constitution. So Parliament's response to the Supreme Court ruling is, okay, if this thing is unconstitutional, let us put it in the Constitution. Because CDF is a slush fund for members of Parliament. There was a time and a place where CDF had a role in our development. But under devolved governments, it really has no role. And it's a system of patronage. And the way CDF works is the MPs have enjoined local communities at the project level, at the constituency level, so that there is a lot of local money and opportunities floating around that look very good. But the reality is that there is a cost to having a fund that is not aligned to the development system, because many of the structures of CDF then are not taken up in the planning process. They become idle and stalled projects. So the point is, Parliament is our weakest link in terms of oversight. We know that. This is because our electoral system, our political accountability system is not serving us. But like I said, we are in a Gen Z moment, and I'll come back to that. Much as the state has used excessive force, has killed our youth, has abducted others, some are still not accounted for. We have bodies in the mortuary not accounted for. We are actually dealing with a murderous regime that has killed its youngest and has threatened them. You should hear young college students saying they receive phone calls threatening them. Can you imagine the psychology of those young people who are abducted and held by people who have, are masked, even though the court has said they're not supposed to do that, and they continue. So we are dealing with a rogue state. And the quest we are on is, how do we get rid of this roguishness? Because this is a roguishness in a political elite with a country that has shown it wants to do better. CDF is at the heart of that rogue state of Parliament, because you'll see Parliament telling the executive, we will not approve the education kitty. We will not approve the water kitty until you give us our CDF. How can they represent us?
So they're blackmailing the executive with
They
that.
have done, in fact, on record. They don't even do it behind the scenes. It's not even a brown envelope.
What
it's
would be the
on the
interest in
Hansard.
that?
Because the political patronage is ability to buy votes. The political patronage is some of the contracts that are through their own shell companies. Transparency in the CDF.
Or
ever
kickbacks.
Since, kickbacks or even whatever, shadow companies. Our open governance beneficial ownership system has never worked. Ask yourself why. Who are the beneficial owners of the contracts that government gives? A lot of them are in political office. So the quest we are on is to deal with what we call the patrimonial state. This is when the political elite are the ones driving corruption through the formal. So formal systems are undermined for private interest. And so I would say that this call to Parliament is going to say that. We expect that. But we are in a Gen Z moment. Article 1, we are the people, is the one that is driving us. People have seen that we can challenge power. And I believe education, because it is the bedrock of any country, we need to rally around this call to harmonize. In 2009, KIPRA and civil society did a review of funds, these funds that exist outside of government. And we found that there is so much waste, there is so much duplication, so much corruption. They are not monitored, they are not evaluated. So you look at CDF and ask, where is the performance report of CDF? When Parliament reviewed the law, they diluted the reporting requirements so they don't even evaluate themselves. You cannot run a country when you waste money, but more to that, we have a proactive proposal on the bedrock of this country, which is education. Can we pool all those resources, get rid of those excess administrative costs, make sure it's accountable, and make education free for everybody using the systems that we've been using?
Dr. Barak, on the CBC, you've faulted it. Now, the university new funding model, where it's based on an individual student need. In fact, you know, part of the considerations here, the socio-demographic data, family education expenditure, and the monthly incomes have now been, you know, put in levels. That is a band 1, a maximum of 5,995 shillings. Band 2, 23,670. Band 3, you know, 70,000 as the cap. And band 4, 120,000. Band 5, which is the highest, is actually 120 shillings and above. So here, students, of course, if you're placed in band 1, you get at least 70% government scholarship, 25% loan, family 5%. And the other day, when the results were out on where they have been placed, the university students, some of them complained that they found themselves in band 5, yet they belong to band, to band 1. On what is happening in the universities, which way to go? Is it time we first of all take a back seat on this university funding model?
Thank you, Joel. First, you did not allow me to drive home the point on CBC, which is very important, because you see, this whole curriculum must be organic. It must flow in an organic way from what you call the first 6 years to the next, I don't know whether they are 2 years, and then 4 years, then to the university. That in terms of the curriculum itself, its objectives and what it's intended to achieve, all these levels of learning and the people who fashion what is learned should be reading from the same script. I'm not aware that beyond the Raphael Munavu report, which just gave some kind of path that should be followed, that anything is happening. Perhaps Wanjiru, who is in the advocacy space, would know whether there is anything happening. But as we were saying earlier on, young people, learners, don't just go to class to learn mathematics and science. They go to school also to learn other things within that environment. And therefore, if you have not moved out of that environment, you are not learning. You are not getting anything new. You think that the world is like a Manyudia primary school, when the world is a lot more than that. You need to go away to learn. So there's need to change the environment,
especially for the grade 9 students who are still domiciled in the primary schools. They should move to high schools. In fact, NAC Kenya Party Leader Martha Karua says that the teachers, the secondary level, are not even in the primary level. So they should utilize even the classrooms that are there for Form 1s.
So there you are. We are talking, I've seen education officials, people from Jogo House, talking about how they are putting up buildings in primary school to accommodate the learners at the next level, while at the same time, there are buildings that are falling vacant in secondary school, because the people who should occupy them have not yet come. They are still lumbered in primary school spaces.
On the university funding
model. Because all this eventually boils down to money, funds, and how we are using them. And this model that we have come up with. President William Ruto, not just his government, but the president himself as an individual entity, has this knack, this love for optics rather than substance, this impressionistic approach to issues, to create impressions. He needs to be persuaded to move away from that. And going in tandem with that, this belief that everything that he has found there is faulty, and therefore that he must change everything. That is where he starts landing himself in trouble. If you find it's working, don't try to fix it. So this system that he's come up with, we are not even sure how these people were assessed, how they were calibrated, how the research was actually done to boil down to the fact that this one belongs to band 1, band 2, band 3, and band 4. We have seen some people who are wallowing in excessive poverty being put in band 4. It is not working. It's not going to work today. It's not going to work tomorrow. And it will not work next year or anytime soon. The president had better eat humble pie. You know, President Julius Nyerere one day apologized to the people of Tanzania and said, I failed you, I'm wrong, forgive me.
So it's time President
William Ruto should eat humble pie, apologize to the people of this country for some of the things he's hurriedly rushing through. And Wanjiru keeps saying we are in a Gen Z moment. This Gen Z moment, I would say we are in the Gen Z process because it has just begun and it's not going to stop. When you see that there is a lull now, it is the lull in the middle of a storm because the conditions, the circumstances, and the grievances that thrust these young people into the streets are still there, and they will come back. And as a student of revolutions in world history, I'll tell you that a revolution can take 1 year, like the Iranian Revolution of 1978, 79. It can take 1 year, like the Filipino Revolution that cast out the Marcos, Ferdinand Marcos system, the Haitian Revolution, yeah, where we are now toying with some experiments.
So in other words, President William Ruto could even go on history as the first president to just have 1 term.
That is staring at him stuck in the eye. If he has any friends, they should tell him.
He has Baba.
Baba is a schemer. It should not surprise me to see Baba and his people in government trooping out at some point and saying, we went in to try to rescue this man, but we have found that this man is beyond redemption, and so we are pulling out.
Well, allow me at that point to take a short commercial break, but I also invite your feedback about social media platforms at K24 TV, at George as well, and SMS and WhatsApp numbers on the bottom of your screens. When we come back, we'll also be touching on the printing of the new currency, costing taxpayers a whopping 14.2 billion Kenya shillings. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.